Today we'll be discussing a very deep topic which comes up again and again, not only in spiritual circles, but also in scientific circles. Free will or destiny. And so today we look at this from two angles. One, we'll start with what science says because it will throw a lot of light into how decisions are made. And then the second part, we'll talk about what teachers like Raman Maharishi and Nisargadatta, what were their views on destiny and free will. And you'll be surprised to hear, and I've got the exact quotes from both the teachers, about what they think about which is true or which is real or which is not real. So we'll start first with understanding free will. What is free will? Free will means at this moment, I am free to take a decision to do what I want. Simply put, that is free will. Now, in science, especially if you have read Sam Harris, many of you would have heard of Sam Harris and you would have read his book on free will. Many of the even teachers, neo-Advaitin teachers, they are hard determinist. What is a determinist? So I'll go a little deeper. Many of you would know these terms. For many of you, these are new terms. So I'll just explain them. So determinism means it's like destiny. It's more of a scientific term for destiny. And it means whatever is happening now has already been written. Whatever will happen in the future is also written down, and everything will happen exactly as it is. There is no deviance from it. There is no question of free will. Now, where does this idea of determinism comes from? Where does it start from? So the concept is very simple and elegant. Imagine there is a billiards table with all these balls, and you hit all the balls with one ball. If you know the trajectory of the first hit, you can calculate where the other balls will go, right? Similarly, when our universe began with the Big Bang, whatever state the matter was, it was like a billiard ball, and then it exploded. And then the stars were born, but everything was determined by what the matter was in the Big Bang. Like the billiards ball, it hit all the balls and they start scattering. And that scattering is, imagine the universe becoming and we are being born. And then whatever I am right now, each and every electron and neuron in my brain is a result of that past hit. And as such, I will keep going in that trajectory. I have no free will. So this is simply put what determinism talks about in scientific terms. So this was very good until we had quantum physics. Quantum physics came in, this entire structure became very questionable. In fact, I read a very good paper long back by Stephen Hawking. So he talks about or dismantles this entire concept that there is no free will and everything is determined with a lot of formulas and a lot of scientific words. But in a very simple word, quantum physics is based on probabilities, uncertainty. at the quantum level, there are no billiard balls which will go straight up in a line. The direction of the billiards ball is probabilistic. And since it is probabilistic, there cannot be determinism. So even after quantum physics has come in, there are a lot of scientists and there are a lot of philosophers, like you must have read Daniel Dennett and others, who still hold onto this philosophies of determinism, etc. Now, another very interesting challenge to free will comes from a guy called Benjamin Libet, and he was a neuroscientist. I think many of you would have read about the famous Libet experiments, which happened in 1960s or 70s. If you have not, after the call, you should just read up about those experiments. They're very fascinating. When I first read them years back, it was like, wow. So what these experiments kind of, they're very simple. They asked a person to lift their finger. So you had the choice of lifting the finger or not lifting the finger. And then the person was, hooked onto all this ECG machines, etc. Now, what they found out was half a second before the person made a decision to lift the finger, the machines recorded, they called it readiness potential. There was a spike in ECG. And after half a second, the person decided that I'll lift my finger. So these experiments proved that the decision was already made in the brain and it came into conscious awareness after half a second. And then the person thought, this is my decision. Now, even these experiments have been dismantled. If you have been reading about them, in 2019 and in 2024, there were a lot of papers published which said that these experiments on readiness potential do not determine what the person is thinking about or what action they will take. So, from the scientific point of view, both neuroscience and quantum physics in the last few years have converged towards the idea that there is free will, that you have the freedom to decide and to partake into action as you want. Then the second part of this puzzle, and then I'll come to the third part, the binary thinking. So first I'll go to the second part, and that is what the sages think about this. Now, most of the time in Advaita, there is a perception that the sages talked about everything being destined, but that is not the case. So I am going to read out a few quotes from our beloved teachers Ramana and Nisargadatta, and you can cross-check these quotes. So they're authentic quotes. I've double-checked. And so Ramana says on free will and destiny are ever existent. Free will and destiny last as long as the body lasts, but knowledge transcends them both. Another place Ramana says, as long as individuality lasts, there is free will. All the scriptures are based on this fact, and they advise directing the free will in the right channel. Find out to whom free will or destiny matters. Find out where they come from and abide in their source. So these were two quotes by Ramana. And I'll come to some quotes by Nisargadatta, and they're all taken from the book I Am That. And there were a lot of questions about free will and destiny in I Am That. So I'll read a few quotes which I found very interesting. So one was, steady fate is stronger than destiny. Destiny is the result of causes and is therefore loosely woven. confidence and good hope will overcome it easily. Second, and I love this quote from Nisargadatta, like this is what actually used to go on in my mind when I ever thought about free will and destiny. So I always was of the thought, even when I was seeking, that there is free will, that destiny, there's nothing called final destiny where everything is written down and I have no control over it. So here Maharaj says something which I love. He says, "You mean to say everybody's life is totally determined at birth? What a strange idea. Were it so, the power that determines would see to it that nobody should suffer." So I'll read this again. You mean to say everybody's life is totally determined at his birth? What a strange idea. Were it so, the power that determines would see to it that nobody should suffer. And I always used to think along this line, if there is no free will, why are the teachers teaching? What are they telling me to follow? Because everything is written down, I have no control. So, how can I meditate if it is already written down that I will never meditate? So, even on closer examination, the whole teaching which Buddha did, or Nisargadatta did, or JK did, they presuppose that someone will be able to follow those teachings with volition. So there are some other quotes of Nisargadatta in I Am That, which you can read, where he talks about this free will in very uncertain terms. Now, having talked about the scientific and the spiritual aspect, let's talk about the third part of it. What if it is not binary? So, binary thinking is there is destiny, there is free will. Either or is correct. What if the truth is somewhere in between? And this is the idea which made the most sense to me. In the sense, there are a lot of things in our past, in our environment, in our genetics, which kind of push us in a particular direction. There might be strong patterns of addiction, strong patterns of depression, anxiety, jealousy, or whatever. And they are so strong that sometimes it is very difficult to overcome, even though we have free will. We want to break that cycle, but we fail a lot of times. And so, even though we are free, we are not completely free. And when Nisargadatta and Ramana said at many places, they've said you're not free. When they say about not being free or you do not have free will, the context they're saying is this context, where the mind and the ego is so much in bondage and identification that it is completely carried away, or the life is completely ruled by the ego. So, though the ego has free will, but that life is not free. This is a context in which the teachers have said, you're not free. And this can be confused with the overall idea of destiny and free will. This is a completely separate line of thinking. So, though I am free, I'm not totally free. Not only physically and genetically, there are a lot of restrictions to your freedom which are imposed by society, as by the government machinery, by laws as well. So you want to do X, but you might not have the freedom to do it. So that freedom or being free is different from free will. Now, the last angle to this, which Advaita talks about and these teachers talk about, they come to a position where they say, what if both destiny and free will were something which referred to a person, and what if that person was not real? So destiny refers to an I which will suffer, which will uh, have a lot of luck, or which will become a millionaire or whatever. And free will also implies an I or a person who is taking certain actions, meditating, seeking. Now, since both of them depend on an I, and what if the I itself was an illusion? Then to whom would destiny or to whom would free will apply? So Advaita deconstructed these binary problem from a completely different framework. On an individual level, and Ramana kept said this again and again, someone asked him, I think they asked Ramana or Nisargat, I'm not sure, but it was something like this. Is the world real? And Ramana said, till you think you are real, the world is real. In the same way, till you think you are there is free will. Because if you think you are a person, of course you have free will. But both of these teachers then pointed you to a deeper place from where the I arises and where both destiny and free will become irrelevant. So when we go deeper, we go behind the I, behind the ego. There is this vast sea of consciousness, which is always free. It is not bound. It does not answer to anyone. It does not have any structure or rules in place. It is completely free. In fact, the word free also does not apply to it. It is, in which both destiny and free will are kind of absent. And that is a truth where Advaita and the Zen masters and other teachers have always pointed to. So we started from the Big Bang deterministic theory, and we have ended back, gone through all these different ideas, and then ended back in the simple wisdom of just being in this consciousness.